Welcome to the Big Play Cleveland Show. I'm Gabriella Cruz alongside Chris McNeil, Nick Padone. We've got so much exciting Cleveland sports news to talk about, mainly the Cavs. They're on a tear right now, 10th straight win, and of course they've improved to 50-10 to become the first team to reach 50 wins this season. And we saw a huge show out of DeAndre Hunter, Ty Jerome, we'll get into it, but also Nick having gone down to the Combine. You got to tell us all your stories. We've got some great content coming. How was the experience?
Yeah, we'll definitely get into it on today's show, do a little combine talk, play some of the best clips. Guys, I'll be honest, I'm beat. In the last 10 days, I went from Arizona spring training to the Indianapolis Combine and come back here. And then we hosted World of T-Shirts over the weekend. Joshua Block on the Big Factor. So go check that interview out in the free Big Play Sports Network app. If you're on TikTok, you've probably heard of World of T-Shirts. We flew him to Cleveland. We did an interview in here. It was bizarre. I'm absolutely spent. These have been the craziest 10 days that I've had in quite some time. So I'm excited for today's show, though, of course.
Well, it's the time of the year you start seeing things ramp up. Like you were at the Combine. You've obviously got the Guardians starting to ramp up. You've got the Blue Jackets down there in Columbus Stadium Series over the weekend, which was fantastic. Awesome. My brother went. I knew a bunch of people who were there, and everybody to a man said this was a first-class experience. They did it right. Everything from the way they honored Johnny Gaudreau and his family to everything on the field, the way that they had the interplay with Ohio State, doing the script to Ohio. They even had some of the helmet stickers. Every time there was a goal by the Blue Jackets, they put a sticker down there on the field. So cool little details like that. It was a fantastic experience. I think it really showcased an organization in the Blue Jackets that have really rallied this year, and it was great for Columbus. It was great for the NHL, and it was a lot of fun for the weekend.
And good for playoff seeding.
Yeah, absolutely. It was also an important game, beating the Red Wings. You know, kind of controversial. Was it a high stick? Was it not? I kind of thought it was. Got away with one, but that's okay when you're at home in a big game like that. It's nice to come out ahead, no matter how it happened. So great job. Tip of the cap to the Blue Jackets and that entire organization.
And then just a quick little Browns hitter here. Browns ranked 30th out of 32 teams on the yearly report card. Did you expect that?
Do we really need another way to say the Browns suck? I mean, that's really what this is. You're punching down at this point. I saw it. The locker room's too small.
There's got to be a numeric way to say it, apparently.
Yeah, the locker room's too small, which eventually is going to be taken care of, we think so, when they go to Brook Park. So, ownership got, I believe, a C+ here, which is actually kind of surprising. I think the players do respect the fact that, the Haslams are willing to pay. We're willing to open the wallet for this team. But ultimately, the performance on the field, Nick, has not been what we've wanted. And I don't care how many report cards I see. I know what I see on the field. 3 wins last year, not enough. That's an F- in my book.
Yeah, and the report cards were a big topic of conversation at the Combine, as you guys could imagine. When Kevin Stefanski Andrew Berry asked about that, they were very deflective. That they try to look at everything that they do as an organization, both on the field and off of it, to improve things for their players. And, we hear it, be said all the time, especially in the busyness of the football season when some of those losses happen and who's to blame. And everybody always says it starts at the top. And when you look at those report cards and some of the things that they graded poorly on, it's kind of a representation of when we always say it starts at the top, and they've got improvements that need to be made all throughout the organization. That's what the offseason's for.
We'll dive in just a little bit more. Let's take our first break of the show. We'll be back with more Big Play Cleveland right after this. Welcome back to the Big Play Cleveland Show. We're going to get our Cleveland headlines underway, brought to you by Fairway Ford.
Cleveland headlines brought to you by Fairway Ford. Fairway Ford is the biggest Ford truck dealership in Ohio. They have the largest selection of Ford F-150s and Super Duty trucks, and they won't be beat on price by any other Ford dealers. So don't let a short drive to Canfield prevent you from saving literally thousands on your new truck. Fairway Ford, the largest inventory of new Ford trucks, the lowest pricing, and the same hometown level of service. Visit fairwayfordohio.com.
Well, guys, none of us needed to communicate to know that we were all going to wear our Cavs gear today. Since last week,
I went old school.
I know you did go old school, which I respect.
Like
it's got like that Mark Price era feel to it.
1990s going backwards. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and so is that On your shirt, how it's a little like crackled, is that natural or did it came like that?
It's supposed to be like
Okay,
that,
all right.
kinda.
I like it.
1992 NBA playoffs, back in the day.
Vintage look, Chris. We respect it. Since last week's episode, the Cavs beat the Magic by 40 in Orlando, guys. We beat Boston after trailing 25-3. What a thrilling comeback that was over the weekend. And then, of course, we just beat Portland in overtime. And I got to point this out. How about DeAndre Hunter, you guys? I mean, since he's been with us, we've just been winning. There's no other way to say it. You know, he makes his first start since being traded to the Cavs, and then he goes game high 32 points. 9 of those were in overtime, and then 7 rebounds. And then Ty Jerome, his Virginia buddy, comes off the bench to stuff 25 points in there, a career high, or maybe it was a season high, 6 steals. Anyway, those two in tandem have been just amazing to watch. What are your thoughts on the big overtime win?
Yeah, and some great moments this week, too, when you had Jason Tatum, right, saying, get the F out of here. That went kind of national. Adidas was even playing off of it. Of course, Adidas with Donovan Mitchell. So they quote tweeted my tweet and put a GIF up there of Donovan kind of sticking it back. So that was really cool. It was neat to see kind of those type of moments.
You got some shoes coming too.
And I got some shoes. I got some Don's. Thanks to Adidas for that. So it's nice to see that kind of emotion injected into these games. We already know the games against Boston, everybody's tuning in. We're certainly tuning in. It's nice to see the players care about it that much. And it's nice to come out with a victory. I know they're down a couple of guys. You know, Jrue Holiday's not there. Kristaps Porzingis isn't there. But still, you were down big. You really had to gut it out in Boston, and that's exactly what this team did to rally in that game.
And the big thing about these regular season games is they're all learning opportunities. You know, we hear that coach speak all the time. It was nice that you fell down 25-3, and I think Cavs fans everywhere were like, oh, the Cavs look scared. Down 25-3 out the jump is horrible, but they were able to come back and win. And I think what you learn from that game is that you're a resilient enough team, obviously, to come back from that massive deficit and get a win against the reigning NBA champions. But I think it also tells me DeAndre Hunter in a 7-game series against the Boston Celtics needs to start.
I agree.
It can't be Max Strus. It needs to be DeAndre Hunter against the Boston Celtics because you need that sort of length that Max Strus just doesn't provide. And they were able to manifest that comeback when Hunter checked into the game off the bench. So I think in a 7-game series, we've learned just how valuable that DeAndre Hunter trade was. Glad that we got the win against Boston, but let's not have a repeat of that ever happen again where you fall down 25-3 out the gate, because come playoff time in the Garden, that could turn into a different type of monstrosity.
Well, and let's not overlook, trap games. You get into this time of the year. We had that game against Portland there on Sunday. That was your classic trap game, a game where you thought that the team might kind of overlook it, especially with this week coming up. You've got a couple of games against Chicago. You got a game against Miami. And so you've got the officials also in that game that seem to be against the Cavs. And we were able to overcome the trap game. We were able to overcome the officials.
Ty Jerome's got a nice little piece of paper coming in the mail.
How much do you think that fine is going to be?
A couple tens of thousands.
Yeah, I think that's going to cost them something.
Yeah.
But that's okay. The team rallies around that sort of thing. And it's nice to have the us against the world mentality, us against the referees, Ohio against the refs. We've always had that mentality here, so you kind of see that playing out once again. But the bottom line is they came back in that game. They also won it. Controversial call at the end that put it into overtime. Then they get it done in overtime. So another big week here. Chicago, Miami. We've got to be able to continue this momentum like we have so far this year.
What are your thoughts on voicing any opinions on the referees if you're a player? I mean, do the rules need to change a little bit? What if it is objectively wrong and incorrect? I mean, should they get a little, I guess this is across sports, should we give them any kind of grace? Should there be any disclaimers or caveats for when you should be allowed without penalty?
It's not going to change on either side.
It won't.
I don't.
No.
I think the players are going to speak out when they want to speak out, and I think the league is going to hold tight because you got players, or you got the officials' unions that are out there, right? That they've got to stand behind, and what they don't want to be shown as is, an organization not willing to stand behind their officials. So they're going to toe the line on that. And then these players, this is their career, and if they feel passionate enough that they're willing to pay some money for their opinions, they're going to do it. And give them credit. they're putting their money literally where their mouth is when you're ripping on the officials, and I support it entirely.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, the officiating was bad. To call her out by name was kind of a little. You don't see that.
That's next level.
You don't see that, in every officiating call out. But for him to say, yeah, Natalie especially was bad, that was hilarious. So I'm glad he did it. It was really that bad. I thought that it was warranted. It'll cost him. I'm glad I wasn't the one that said it and had to, foot the bill. I'm glad I could say whatever I want to on this show. But I agreed with Ty Jerome in his entirety for sure. Had no issue with what he said.
I like a lot of McNeil's memes, as everyone does, and I kind of feel like every week we should start throwing out a couple. We couldn't use the Boston one only because we weren't sure about copyright, but with the Tatum one with him, get the F out of here. But there was one that I really liked that Ryan's got teed up, so I just like to throw these out here because if you don't follow McNeil on Twitter, he doesn't, or on X, he doesn't miss. But, the Cavs being 8-0 with Hunter
the missing piece
in the lineup, I mean, this is the missing piece, is it not? So we can have some appreciation for this nice little meme, compliments of McNeil.
And I love George Niang. I love Karis LeVert, but boy, it seems like there has been a shift ever since we've gotten DeAndre Hunter. Right now, coming off the bench, I'm with you, Nick. I think come Boston in the playoffs, I think that's going to switch. He's going to be in the starting lineup, but he adds so much to this team, both from outside, inside, the physicality. I hate that word, but he really adds a lot. And you can tell that this team gets energized when he's on the floor right when they need it.
So many people made, George Niang, Karis LeVert out to be these big culture guys, and they were, loved in that locker room for sure.
Like, we love Niang.
We love Niang here, but winning is what matters most to these guys. And to be, 8-0 ever since that trade happened, and they believe, they see their path to the Eastern Conference Finals, to the NBA Finals, and DeAndre Hunter is a big piece of that. So I think the locker room never missed a beat after that trade because they've continued to win, and that's a credit to everybody involved.
And I mean, in the words of Kenny Atkinson, he carried the team in every way. So him saying that there's no way they get it done without him, Nick, kind of gives me the inclination that we are going to see him starting much more often. Okay, let's switch gears here as I find where we were at. Okay, so we did a little dive into the Cavs, unpacked the Boston game. We already talked about the Browns and their report card ranking. I don't think we need to go through any more of that, unless you guys want to talk Browns.
I mean, notable grades. I thought that the locker room getting an F- was extra hilarious just because, I don't even think you could get that in school. Oof. I failed Algebra 1 my freshman year of high school, and it was just a straight F. It was not even an F-. Treatment of family, D+. Again, that's what I'm saying. Start from the top. Training room, D+. Training staff, C-. Team travel, D. Head coach, C. That's the 30th ranked coach in the NFL.
That one hurts.
Again, guys don't like losing. Guys don't like losing. And when you win 3 games, they're going to point fingers at anybody and everybody. I would like to see what Stefanski would have graded the players throughout this season. Probably a C, if not worse. Ownership, C+, and weight room, A. So the little bit of work that they put into that facility in Berea, got that new weight room, it gets an A. So yeah, that's as much as we got to talk about the report cards, I feel like.
McNeil?
Well, that training room at a D+, you want to see your players on the field, right? And we talk about the injuries that hit every NFL team. I think that's an area where you can really set yourself apart, is having a good training staff, having a good training room. And that really concerns me if the players on this team don't feel that they've got that kind of support organizationally from the Browns. So that's something I think in the short term that can be corrected fairly quickly. So I would like to see that improve because I'd like to see the players on the field contributing because that's what we need. That's a 17-game schedule.
That dates back to Baker and Odell. Remember when Odell got hurt with that weird hemorrhoid surgery that he had to have, and Baker called out the whole training staff. He said, that was not handled correctly by some of the people in our own building. And people were like, wow, that's your starting franchise quarterback just called out the medical staff on the team, the training staff on the team. So, that's something that's been an issue for some time now.
Kind of surprising, too, the treatment of family getting a D+. So you got to wonder what those situations
are. Some of the specifics, the family has a meeting area after the games in the parking lot while the coaches are allowed in the coaches' families are allowed in the building. So
not a good look.
Starts at the top. At the top.
Let's get into, I'm excited to talk about Nick and all of his combine experience, but let's take a break. We'll be back with more of that here on the Big Play Cleveland Show. Welcome back to the Big Play Cleveland Show. It is Combine Talk time, okay? Presented by our friends over at Garage Beer. Garage Beer, perfect beer for any occasion. It's small batch, no frills, no bitterness. It's just beer that tastes like beer. And we're excited to see how Nick's trip went. Obviously, like you said, it's been sort of a whirlwind for you. You were in Arizona.
I need some Garage Beer, man.
You probably need a whole pack of Garage Beer. But a lot of the content you got is cool. We'll play some of that. But just like your overall first impressions, how was it?
Yeah, it was awesome. You know, it's cool. And we talked about it a little bit on last week's show that Indianapolis and the Combine in general is cool and fun because everybody gets down there. Everybody talks. It's the first real event after the Super Bowl where the football world every season descends on Indianapolis, and it's kind of just a football hub for a couple of days. And obviously the prospects are why everybody's there, and the upcoming NFL draft is why everybody's there. But we've seen in the past, this is where the Odell Beckham Jr. trade was worked out between John Dorsey and then Giants general manager Dave Gettleman. There was plenty of talk about these report cards, about Myles Garrett and his situation, about what these kids were able to do in their college careers. So it's cool because it's all-encompassing football, and if you're, you know, kind of a football fan or football media or whatever it might be, it is fun to get down there for a couple days for sure.
Did you stop by the Starbucks down there, the scene of the crime?
I did. I had to stop on Ground Zero the day after the brawl. Now I'm happy to report you guys could get a good look at my face here, Ryan, on this solo shot. No fights for me down there in Indianapolis. No scraps in said Starbucks. But yeah, friend of show Jordan Schultz. I'd pick him in any fight, anytime.
Yeah, him over Ian Rappaport there. For those of you who don't know, got into a little skirmish over some reporting surrounding Tom Brady.
And Matthew Stafford, who's like since they went back to the Rams. So the whole thing was really much ado about nothing. Like it's all in the rear view now, but funny that it happened. And that really was the talk of Indianapolis all week was, you know, have you been to the Starbucks? Have you heard about what happened? Everybody was talking about that.
That is so funny. Yeah, I was trying to piece together the details of
and then I didn't end up at St. Elmo's. I booked my trip kind of late. I did end up at Steak and Shake twice. I'm not ashamed to admit. Steak and Shake, guys, like when I was at high school, like I went to high school in Nordonia, used to be a Steak and Shake in Macedonia. Yeah. Ryan's shaking his head. That was the spot. Like it was open 24 hours, 7 days a week. You go in that Steak and Shake whenever. It's since gone, and I don't even know that there's one like near us in Northeast Ohio.
Really? So we've got them all over in the Columbus area.
Yeah. They're sparse, few and far between here in Northeast Ohio. So there was one walking distance from my hotel. I went there twice.
Nice. I would imagine the shrimp and cocktail sauce. How good was it at Steak and Shake?
I was going, Frisco melt and cookies and cream milkshake.
Oh man, I used to get like the half banana, half chocolate milkshake.
Yeah,
I know.
Speaking of my heart. Yep.
All right. Yeah, what else? Okay, so you got to see, obviously, a lot of events. You got to interact with players, get just some video of coaches, people speaking, Andrew Berry. How about to start, like, your events that you enjoyed seeing?
Yeah, it was cool to be able to see them, you know, work out in person. Really, I was there for the press conferences, so it was good to hear kind of what the Browns are thinking. You know, having the number 2 overall pick. One thing that I went there understanding, this is not a spot that the Browns want to be in again anytime soon. I mean, the fact that they have the number 2 pick and the fact that last year was that bad was a surprise and a massive disappointment to everyone inside of that building. So they need to use this number 2 overall pick on something of importance to get it right. And Shedeur Sanders and Cameron Ward were at the epicenter of those conversations all weekend.
Shedeur today spent time with a lot of the players over the last 48 hours, a lot of speed dating going on. But Shedeur is a very, very impressive young man, was raised the right way. Obviously is a heck of a football player, that's evident off the tape, but really impressed with the person.
When you mentioned Shedeur being raised the right way, how does, and you kind of know about this too, how does having a parent that works in this business, whether that be in the team or as a player, help prepare someone for that kind of responsibility?
Yeah, I think he certainly has a great resource in his dad to understand what it takes to be a great pro. You know, he played for Pat Shurmur at Colorado, you know, Pat being a longtime NFL coach, so he understands that as well. So, yeah, I think he's taking advantage of those people close to him.
Shedeur Sanders definitely was the kind of name that continued to surround the Browns all weekend. And later, you know, on Friday when the QBs spoke to the media, here's Shedeur Sanders on why he should be the next quarterback of the Cleveland Browns.
Because I've done it at 2 locations already, so it's simple. So that's why when people say I'm not you know, one of the top quarterbacks or the top quarterback, is what are y'all going based off of? Because I did it year after year after year, and you see the progression. So it's like, obviously, it got to be some type of external hate that you have for the family, for the last name, for anything, because I know I proved myself on the field. Playing, if that's not what you're trying to do, don't get me. If you ain't trying to change the franchise or the culture, don't get me. So you should know history repeats itself over and over and over, and I've done it over and over and over, so it should be no question why an NFL franchise should pick me.
Chris, obviously Shedeur didn't throw. We knew that going into the week. We talked about it last week, but he is definitely hanging his hat on the fact that he went to the HBCU ranks in Jackson State and turned that program into a powerhouse, and then went to Colorado, laughing stock of college football, and turned them into a ranked contender. At one point, it looked like they could crack the college football playoffs. Shedeur was very confident all week long.
On top of that, he also, proving you can do this in any situation, plays the chip on his shoulder, saying that his last name may be a reason that a lot of people don't like him. I mean, athletes historically do this, where they can come up with just about anything to make a chip on their shoulder. He's got that as his chip, so that's what's going to kind of drive him. It's nice to see that he understands that you need to change a culture. That's what you're going to be looking at as one of the top quarterbacks in this draft, and especially if he comes to the Cleveland Browns. We just saw the report cards. There's a lot of culture to be changed. We saw what was on the field last year with 3 wins, so that's what we're going to be looking for. It'll be interesting to see. I know what he says. Can he actually do it at the professional level? And that's what I don't know.
Yeah, and he said, I've confirmed it, Cleveland will be his first top 30 visit. So the Browns are considering him a top 30 prospect in this class. He will be in Berea, Ohio this week. He's going to meet with the Browns by the time we do our next show. So, I mean, this is a guy that they're putting a lot of homework into. Obviously didn't throw down there in Combine, but they met with him throughout the week, and he's very confident that he could be the guy that turns around the Browns. This is about a month removed from some people questioning, would he even be allowed to play in Cleveland? Was that something that Deion Sanders would even allow? I think that we've definitely moved past that. He's definitely in play. Would he fit in Cleveland is the question. Andrew Berry answered that question, and he talked a little bit about maybe it's in the Browns' best interest to tailor their offense towards the quarterback that they're thinking. And I think as we're starting to play these clips, you guys are going to get a little bit of an understanding on how the Browns might be thinking. So here's Andrew Berry.
You know, more generally, you want to get the best in a player at that position that you can. Your offense should be geared towards that player's strengths, and that's any quarterback across the league. You know, I think that if you look at, I'll give a couple of examples. If you look at when Baltimore selected Lamar, their quarterback was Joe Flacco. Couldn't necessarily have 2 more polar opposite styles. Or when Kansas City selected Patrick Mahomes, their quarterback was Alex Smith. And those organizations shifted in turn to build systems and offenses that accentuated what their young quarterbacks at the time did really, really well and minimized their weaknesses. And I think that's really what most teams do that have success when they draft a young signal caller and put them in. And that's something that we'll have to do if you're bringing our signal caller on board as well.
Tailoring your offense around a young quarterback. That was interesting because I think a lot of people have drawn similarities to what works in Shedeur Sanders' game to the system that we've heard that Kevin Stefanski wants to run this year, and that Joe Flacco kind of pass-happy offense that we saw the Browns get to the playoffs. That's what Shedeur was at his best when he was in that offense at Colorado. So it's a couple of interesting clips there from the Combine that I think maybe paint a little bit of a picture of the Browns leaning towards Shedeur Sanders, understanding that he'll probably be there with the number 2 overall pick, understanding Cam Ward could go 1 to Tennessee, or if the New York Giants trade up to 1, Cam Ward could be that number 1 pick, could leave Shedeur Sanders right in the Browns' lap is the kind of the vibe that I walked away out of Indianapolis with.
You see a lot of parallels there between what Shedeur was saying, what Andrew Berry was saying about changing not only the culture. Now in this case, you're taking it on the field, you're talking about schematics and what a quarterback can do and how you tailor your offense for a quarterback. So obviously we knew the Browns would have to give a lot of thought to the quarterback position. After kind of hearing things this week, it sounds like they're really targeting a quarterback at the top. I don't think this is talk for a quarterback later on in the draft who you think is going to change the culture, who you're going to gear your entire offense around. You're definitely talking about a pick that number 2 pick, or if you trade up, I don't know what they may end up doing. But I think they're looking at a quarterback there. Before going into this, I thought maybe defensive end, maybe we'd look along the defense. I'm not thinking so anymore, Nick. Did you get that same impression there on the ground in Indianapolis?
Yeah, and we heard from Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, these guys that are going to be top 5 picks, top 10 picks at absolute worst in the upcoming NFL draft. And they all spoke highly of Cleveland. And, Abdul Carter was asked about, potentially having the opportunity to play with Myles Garrett. Travis Hunter said that the receiver that he watches a lot of tape of is Jerry Jeudy, because they're both guys from Florida. So everyone complimentary of Cleveland. But I think they understand that you're going to be back in the same spot with this number 2 overall pick unless you address that quarterback position. And I think they not feel the pressure, but understand that, hey, maybe they didn't make the Deshaun Watson sin. That could have been an outside factor, maybe ownership. But Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, while they didn't make that sin, they're the ones sitting in the pew doing the penance for it. They're the ones that have to right the wrong of that mistake. And I think that all comes to fruition this April. And ultimately, today, first week of March, I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be the number 2 overall pick to the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I was going to say, even speaking of tailoring, even tailoring their social media, it looks like the Browns have really embraced Shedeur, and just some of the things that they've been putting out, it kind of feels like there's a claiming element to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was cool hearing from Jackson Dart, Will Howard, some of these guys that will be around late. Even Travis Hunter, his whole availability, we saw him after winning the Heisman. He was Mr. Smiles, happy-go-lucky. Man, Combine Week, he was all business, nothing longer than a sentence answer, and he found a way to work into every single answer that he intends on playing both sides
ways,
of the ball in the NFL. Andrew Berry told the Cleveland media they view him primarily as a wide receiver. So look in between the lines there. You've got the number 2 overall pick. This is a guy that wants to play both ways. The Browns view him as a wide receiver. You've got so many needs. Are you really going to draft a receiver with the number 2 overall pick? I don't think so.
I'll tell you what, from Hunter's perspective, I'd want to be paid like a wide receiver, no matter where I'm playing on the field, because you get paid a lot more as a wide receiver than you do as a corner, even though both are elite positions, skilled positions out there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like you said, he's been banging the drum going both ways. I think the Browns look at him as a receiver. I don't think he's going to end up in Cleveland at the end of the day, but what a tremendous talent he is.
And I think in a dream world, Andrew Berry would love to add a player of that caliber. The fact, and Andrew Berry said, the fact that he could score a touchdown whenever he's on the field on either side of the football is something we've never seen before. So I think he would love a playmaker like that. I just don't know that right now. It's kind of like right person, wrong time. They understand they need a quarterback right now.
But you do have a little clip on that, right?
I do. Here's Travis Hunter adamantly proclaiming that he will play on both sides of the ball when he gets to the National Football League.
I did some meetings at receiver, did some meetings at DB, so still up in the air.
What's your sales pitch about why you think you should be able to play both ways?
They say nobody has ever done it for real the way I do it, but I tell them that I'm just different. I'm a different person.
That's some badass difference, too, by the way. Could you imagine playing at that level and realizing you can do 2 things?
And he spoke at length about, some of the rehab and the amount of care and focus that he puts into his body so he could play that many snaps on both sides of the ball. It's going to be college football and the NFL are different, though. I think he'll maybe contribute on both sides of the ball, but I think whichever team selects him is going to have to make a position his primary position, kind of what Andrew Berry said. The Browns view him primarily as a receiver. So we'll see what happens.
Well, good job, Nick. Thanks for sharing your content with us, and your first time in Indy, crushed it. And we're going to take a break now. We'll be back with more Big Play Cleveland right after this.
Fill in the blank on the Big Play Cleveland Show, brought to you guys by our friends over at Northeast Factory Direct. The calendar is flipped to March. Spring is in the air right around the corner. There's no better time to upgrade your home than Northeast Factory Direct. Maybe it's time to upgrade your bedroom set. They have beds, dressers, nightstands, wardrobes, huge selection of mattresses. Maybe you're finally ready to build that dream kitchen you've always wanted. Do some entertaining this spring and summer. Northeast Factory Direct has hardware, cabinets, countertops, flooring, even high-end level of appliances. They truly have it all. Wait no longer. You shop online anytime. Go about northeastfactorydirect.com. You got to check them out in store, though. Cleveland, Euclid, Macedonia, North Canton. When you're shopping in store, make sure to ask for that extra special big play bonus. You're going to get a hookup for listening to the program. You're going to thank us later. Thanks, Northeast Factory Direct. Go check them out today.
All right, so speaking of bonus, we're talking about bonus basketball that happened over the weekend and the excitement that accompanied that. Let's do our fill in the blank. Our first question is kind of alluding back to what we were talking about earlier, Nick, about, okay, Max Strus has been starting as the 5th starter. Do we want that to continue, especially with the way DeAndre Hunter has been balling out? Blank should be the Cavs' 5th starter along with the core 4.
You know, back when we were at the Sports Awards earlier this year, right after we had made this big trade, I was talking to some folks, and my assumption was that DeAndre Hunter was going to come in, step in once he's ready, and be a starter on this team. Now, my thinking has changed a little bit on this. I think eventually he will be a starter, but this team is going to run into some issues at some point, right? We're going to have something we're going to have to overcome. Hopefully it happens later on. It's going to happen against Boston, but at some point, we're going to reach a point where we need to pull a lever. And it's nice to have that lever. So for right now, I'm okay with Max Strus starting and continuing to start. I want to wait until we need to pull a lever to put DeAndre Hunter in there. So I am willing to wait rather than worry about chemistry or those other things. I think the team has been playing well enough in the regular season. When we get to the postseason, we want to have adjustments that we can make, and I think that might be the lever that we may eventually pull.
I think so. And right now, I mean, you have to be in a mode as the number 1 team in the East, the number 1 team in the NBA. You have to be in a mode where you just trust Kenny Atkinson. You know, like this regular season has been one to remember. I mean, he has pulled all the right strings so far. So I'm going to trust whatever Kenny Atkinson wants to do as we round out this regular season. Come playoff time, I think you probably insert DeAndre Hunter. I think right now, maybe some of the Cavs' logic, and I think it could be flawed logic, although small, you know, when you've already got 60 wins, you're doing most things correctly. I think they're still hoping that they can unlock a version of Max Strus that we saw with the Miami Heat. So far is yet to show itself. I mean, we've seen games where he can get hot and he could hit a lot of threes, but on a consistent basis, it's just not there on a night in, night out basis. And I think that's because the Cavs have a lot of other players like Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, even Sam Merrill could get there and do Max Strus's job at a more efficient clip. Kenny Atkinson also talks about so much that it's not really about who starts the game, it's about who finishes it. So I think they could get creative on a couple of different fronts come off season. Well, the problem come postseason. Right?
Yeah, and the problem is with Max Strus is when he's off offensively,
he's useless.
He's useless because defensively he's going to hurt you. Garland's already out there. Garland's not the greatest defensively, so you run into problems right off the bat. So it's nice to only have one of those guys on the floor at any time. Yep. So it'll be a nice lever to pull if we need to go to Hunter later on in the playoffs.
And that's synonymous with any player that's predominantly a shooter in the NBA. Like if your shot's off, you're doing very little to help the cause, and you're probably hurting.
To me, that says bench player.
Yeah.
That says a role player coming off the bench more than it does a starter.
It's crazy how it really just comes down to consistency, and it's so simplistic in nature. If you can just show up the most number of times and be consistent, then you have that 5th starting spot. Speaking of 5th starters, the Guardians' 5th man in the rotation should be...
I'd love it to be Tristan McKenzie. I'd love for that story to come full circle after what we saw last year coming off the injury. I mean, when he's out there, it sticks. I mean, he's a guy you can rally behind. He looks different when he's out there. He throws hard. He's up there hitting 95. If we can get that with a little bit of movement, I think he could be the guy. Otherwise, you're looking at a couple of lefties. I mean, you got Logan Allen out there, also would be a good story. Joey Cantillo, I mean, this guy grew up surfing. He's a strong dude, kind of the opposite of Tristan McKenzie. Love to see him out there. So you've got a lot of options if you're the Cleveland Guardians right now.
Yeah, and you would think that, you know, Bybee, Williams, Ortiz, and Lively have kind of the top 4 locked up, and I would love nothing more than it to be McKenzie. I agree with Chris. I think he just has the upper hand over Cantillo, Allen, you know, some of the new guys as well, because we've seen Tristan McKenzie pitch at that rate before where he looks like a Cy Young candidate. You know, maybe consistency is the name of this fill-in-the-blank segment. Northeast Factory Direct's prices are consistently low. go. How do you like that? But like we talked about it with the Cavs, and that, fifth starter, Gab, you said it, like if somebody that could consistently hit shots, that's what the guards need in a fifth starter. Somebody that could provide consistency to that lineup. Sometimes we could have Cy Young, Tristan McKenzie. Sometimes we have AA Akron, Tristan McKenzie. We got to find some sort of consistency with whoever is that fifth starter.
All right. Well, we're going a little inconsistent now, but the Blue Jackets playing outdoors at the Shoe, which my friends went down to, said it was freaking
cool.
awesome.
I'm jealous that I was unable to attend that. I think that would have been a cool event to be at. I know that's a big deal for the city of Columbus to, get that big game in the Shoe, iconic venue, iconic game, important for the current state of, the one knock that this had was for like the NHL at large was kind of maybe a meh matchup. You've got the Blue Jackets and Detroit, two teams that kind of medal around the middle or lower divisions, but these are now two teams that are fighting for a playoff spot or a wild card playoff spot at that. So it was great to see the city of Columbus get to celebrate the Blue Jackets all season long with some of the cool things that they've been able to do around Johnny Hockey and keep that celebration alive for an outdoor game. I thought it was really well done.
And bring some of that Ohio versus Michigan on the ice there.
Yeah.
They also were able to incorporate some of the traditions they've got at Ohio State. They did a skull session, essentially. They went over to St. John's before it. They had awesome. OAR, which is a band that I absolutely love. They're from the Columbus area, seen them several times. They were performing pregame. You had 21 Pilots out there, another Columbus band. So it's really cool to see the way that they brought in the locality for all this stuff. Of course, you had the band doing the Script Ohio out there. I already talked about the helmet stickers they had after every goal. So they really tried to incorporate both traditions that you have for the Blue Jackets, bringing the cannon in, and also the things that exist already there on campus and marry the two together. And I thought it was just a wonderful thing for Columbus, a great thing for Ohio State, and an awesome thing for the Blue Jackets.
Chris, favorite OAR song?
Oh, man, Crazy Game of Poker. That's the classic. Love and Memories is pretty good.
Okay,
That's kind of a harder rocking one, So California is pretty good. They
just have good
I celebrate
vibes,
their
good
whole
memories.
catalog.
Yeah.
How about that? I see them
like
every year when they come into Columbus. It's fantastic.
That's awesome. All right, let's take a break. We'll be back with more Fill in the Blank right after this. All right, welcome back to the Big Play Cleveland Show. We continue our Fill in the Blank brought to you by our friends at Northeast Factory Direct. Okay, the Browns need to blank during free agency this year. Is there a certain player position?
Need to do?
Yeah.
We got holes on this team all over the place. I'd say tight end, we're probably in pretty good shape. Outside of that, you're looking at wide receiver, you're looking at line, you're looking at backs. We need a quarterback. The defense has got holes, even questions in the secondary. So, Nick, anything and everything should be on the table, both between the draft as well as free agency. And that's where the Browns are at, which I cannot believe after last year thinking, boy, when you look at this team on paper, they could be one of the best in the NFL. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, were we wrong. And now here we are, bottom of the NFL, drafting at the top and hopefully finding some free agents that might be able to bridge us to whatever the future might be for the Browns.
Yeah, and the cap space went up, so that's always good news. You got more money to spend, which is important. I'd say the Browns need to figure out the Myles Garrett thing during free agency. That's just one, especially talking about things that were discussed.
Do we trade him? Putting you on the spot.
I don't know. I think we do. I think you trade. I don't understand. I just don't understand how you can bring that guy back into the locker room after he said that he doesn't trust the vision. He doesn't think that the team can contend for a Super Bowl in the immediate.
David Njoku did it. And David Njoku, I just mentioned tight end. We're pretty well set.
I think it's different, though, when it's like one playmaker versus, this is Myles Garrett, who really has been the face of the franchise for the last 8 years because you haven't had a quarterback. This is the defensive player of the year who publicly doubted the Browns' vision. When David Njoku was doing it, he was doing it because he was trying to get a paycheck. And maybe that's ultimately what happens with this Myles Garrett thing. I don't think it would be an extension. I think it would have to be they rip up his existing contract and give him a brand new one as the highest paid defensive player in the history of the sport, spanned across the next 5 years. The Browns are dug in. Myles Garrett's dug in. I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but you would think that they should probably figure that out sometime soon, because I don't think that free agency is going to be a big deal for the Browns this year. I think we're going to see a bunch of people, Chris, I want you maybe to be the first, tweeting out that meme where it's the guy with the stick pointing the helmet that says, come on, do something. Because when that legal tampering opens, maybe they'll, do a couple small things here and there to plug some holes, fill some depth. I don't think that they're going to be big time free agent spenders, because they're not just a D tackle away like they've been.
That's it.
In
if they're not going to spend in free agency, they're telling you what I think is the truth, which is we're not going to compete next year. We're not going to be very good. We're not going to go out there and plug these holes. We're going to plug these holes with young guys coming up through the draft and through our internal development. It's not going to be free agents. It's not going to be topping off, what we think is a Super Bowl contender by any means. This is a team that is barely going to be able to compete next year, and we're not going to add any big name talent onto it.
11 picks, Chris. 11.
That's a lot of picks. That's a lot of picks.
All right, gang. Let's do a little quarterback carousel rapid fire. This is new, but just fill in the blank with me. Next season, Sam Darnold will play for...
It's going to be that rotation of the Raiders and the Giants on a lot of these, and I'm going to go Giants on this one. What if he ends up back in New York this time with the Gents?
I don't think this would be good for the Browns. I'm going to say Sam Darnold plays for the Tennessee Titans and adds even more uncertainty to the top of the draft where there's already so much uncertainty.
How about Russell Wilson will play for?
Oh, Pete Carroll and the Raiders. He's going to go there. It's going to get the band back together with the Raiders, and then they're going to roll on. So I think he's going to be with the Raiders.
I think I think as well. I like Russell Wilson's the Raiders, and I think they're a team that would be more apt for a guy like Jackson Dart or Will Howard or Jalen Milroe in later rounds. So Russell Wilson could play out the year and have someone in waiting.
Okay, he's not a free agent, but Kirk Cousins will play for?
Trade to the Jets. I could see. We're talking about New York teams. I could see him going to the Jets.
I'm going to go Cleveland Browns.
Ooh,
I think
here we go.
Maybe Kirk Cousins gets cut, winds up in Cleveland with the Browns, and that's kind of the QB room. Cousins, Sanders, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
All right. Hey, let's take a break. We'll be back with more Big Play Cleveland right after this. Welcome back to our Fill in the Blank segment. We've got some quarterback carousel fill in the blanks that we've just been continuing to answer here. Now, Aaron Rodgers, this is a different situation, but he'll play for.
I think he may play the waiting game for a little bit. I could see that. It's a 17-game game season. You see a long training camp. There's a lot of things that veterans don't want to be involved with. And we know that there's going to be injuries at the quarterback position. So maybe he waits and he finds out where a good situation might be, where they're ready to win now, and the quarterback goes down. I could see something along those lines happening. Otherwise, maybe the Rams. I could see him going out there, Devontae Adams, maybe getting the band back together out there. So there's a couple of options for Mr. Aaron Rodgers.
I think right now New York Giants would probably be the favorite, like the betting favorite. So maybe I'll hedge my bet and say Aaron Rodgers ends up on the Giants. If Sam Darnold goes to the Titans, Rodgers goes to the Giants. That makes sense in my mind. Wild card, Aaron Rodgers, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Ooh.
Don't sleep on that. Don't sleep on Aaron Rodgers of the Pittsburgh Steelers, because that's probably a team that likes to go about their business quietly. Probably has the wherewithal to believe that they're just a quarterback away. They were just in the playoffs last year. I know it wasn't pretty, but they made the playoffs somehow. Aaron Rodgers of Pittsburgh would be fun for everybody but the Cleveland Browns.
I was thinking, too, Stafford just restructured to stay there with the Rams, didn't he? So
yeah.
Probably not going to see Rodgers out there anytime soon. So
different yellow team.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, you were talking about putting your bets on just now who your guy would be or what would happen. And we're going to finish out this fill in the blank with an interesting release that came from the MLB commissioner, Rob Manfred, and what he was saying about giving some leniency or removing Pete Rose from baseball's ineligible list.
We even saw Donald Trump tweet about this very late on, I believe, Friday, talking about Pete Rose. This is step one. You have to get him off the ineligible list for MLB. Then you've also got to get Cooperstown, which also has a rule against him being there. Yeah. You got to get him off of that list, and then you've got to get him on the ballot. So it's really a three-step process, from what I understand, for Pete Rose to be considered for the Hall of Fame. This is the first one. Now that he's gone, I could see this easily happening. I think that the winds have kind of shifted. Now we see gambling more prevalent. Obviously, the integrity of the game is still at question, so you're going to have those old heads that are in there that are going to push back against that. But I think ultimately this is going to be a path that's going to result in Pete Rose being in the Hall of Fame.
He deserves to be in there. He so majorly deserves to be in there. Great Patriot, Pete Rose. I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer.
So, do you agree with it?
Yeah, I agree with it. I mean, man, we're living in a world like Reggie Bush got his Heisman back from NIL. That was deserved that he got that back. In this current sports gambling landscape, where it just runs rampant, I think Pete Rose deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Never bet against his own team. I think that's what ultimately gets him in there.
We've been down this road. If you're not betting for your team on a given night, you're betting that they're going to lose if you're used to betting.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I think the time has come now. Put Pete in. I'm fine with it.
It's a shame that he never got to see it himself. That's really the sad piece of this, is that they waited until he was gone.
Is it?
I think.
I don't know. He's got to serve some sort of a sentence for what he did at that time in baseball.
Yeah, but that's crazy.
Lifelong sentence.
A life sentence, right?
As far as he's concerned, it was an eternal sentence, and now we're changing it after he's gone. So
his legacy will be there. His legacy will be there for generations after we're gone. Nick, that legacy is going to be in Cooperstown, so we'll always have that.
That's a wrap for our Big Play Cleveland show. Thanks so much for watching this week. We'll see you next week.
Welcome to Big Play, the fastest growing sports media company in America.
I'm gonna keep it straight with you. The reason you should watch our show is because I look good, baby.
Come get some!
Join our millions of fans for live sports talk shows hosted by the top former athletes and sports personalities in the industry.
Ohio, it's my home state.
Obviously, I'm a diehard Cleveland sports fan.
Watch what you want, where you want, when you want. Welcome to Big Play.